Jenny, don't panic. We sold the condo. I stared at my phone, still too drugged to understand what my father had just said. 7 hours earlier, surgeons had opened my back to repair the damage that had made every step feel like electricity shooting through my spine. Now I was lying in recovery, barely able to lift my head, with 61 missed calls glowing on my screen. I replayed Dad's voicemail. Madison's wedding bills were getting out of control, and you were out cold, so I signed the papers for you. It's handled. Handled? My $380,000 condo. The home I'd worked for, paid off myself, and modified specifically so I could recover after this surgery. Gone. A second voicemail started automatically. This one was Mom. Please don't make this into a family crisis, Jenny. Your sister's wedding is 4 weeks away. We did what needed to be done. You should be thanking your father for taking care of everything while you couldn't. I gripped the phone until my IV line tugged against my wrist. Then I called Dad. He answered almost immediately. Finally, how are you feeling? Did you sell my condo? Silence. Then he sighed. Jenny, we're not doing this while you're emotional. Did you sell my condo? Yes. My heart monitor began beeping faster. A nurse glanced toward me from the doorway. Dad continued like he was explaining a grocery purchase. You'll stay with us while you recover. After that, you can figure out another place. Madison had deposits coming due, and we couldn't let her lose the wedding. You sold my home for a wedding. You have a career, Jenny. You'll recover. I was 31 years old. I had spent years working as a physical therapist, saving every spare dollar until that condo belonged to me outright. And because I was the dependable daughter, the unmarried one without children, my parents had apparently decided my stability belonged to everyone. How could you sign anything? I asked. The property is in my name. Dad's voice hardened. You gave me power of attorney. I had every right. That stopped me. Years earlier, before another medical procedure, I had signed limited documents allowing Dad to handle certain matters if I became incapacitated. For several seconds, lying there with anesthesia still clouding my thoughts, I wondered if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Then I remembered something. 3 months earlier, Dad had started asking questions about my condo. First casually. Have you ever thought about borrowing against it? Then more directly. Madison's wedding is getting expensive. Family helps family. I had refused every time. And eventually, those conversations bothered me enough that I visited an attorney named Claire Bennett. Claire had helped me make one quiet legal change to protect the condo. Dad knew I had spoken to a lawyer. What he didn't know was exactly what we had done. Jenny, Dad said, are you listening? Yes. Good. Then stop worrying about this and focus on walking again. I ended the call. The nurse stepped closer. Are you okay? I need privacy for 5 minutes. She nodded and closed the door. Even shifting upright sent pain tearing through my back. I couldn't stand without help. I couldn't drive. I couldn't even leave the hospital. But I could make one phone call. I found Claire's number and pressed call. Because if Dad really had the legal authority he claimed he had, why had Claire warned me 3 months earlier that someone might eventually try exactly this? Claire answered on the third ring. Jenny, someone sold my condo. There was a pause, then the sound of movement on her end. What do you mean, someone? My father. He says he used my power of attorney while I was in surgery. Claire didn't reassure me. She didn't tell me everything would be fine. Instead, her voice became very precise. Did you personally sign anything authorizing a sale? No. Did you approve a buyer? No. Did you sign a deed? No. Then don't sign anything now. Forward me every voicemail, text, and document your father sends you. And Jenny, don't confront him again until I check the property record. Before I could ask what she suspected, someone knocked. The door opened. Dad walked in first. Mom followed carrying flowers, with Madison behind her. Dad looked almost cheerful. There she is. I lowered my phone. Mom placed the flowers beside my bed. We need you calm, sweetheart. Calm about losing my home. Madison folded her arms. Jenny, I didn't ask them to sell it. Then tell them to undo it. Her eyes dropped. It's not that simple. Mom immediately stepped in. The venue needs its final payment. Catering went up. There are flowers, guest accommodations, the honeymoon. You're listing wedding expenses like they explain stealing my condo. Dad's jaw tightened. Nobody stole anything. He pulled a chair closer. You have more than Madison does. You have a solid career. No children, no mortgage. Once you recover, you can rebuild. I stared at him. And Madison. She only gets one wedding. There it was. The same rule I had lived under for years. Because I was responsible, I was expected to sacrifice. Show me the sale contract. Dad's expression changed. You don't need to deal with paperwork right now. You just sold a $380,000 property in my name. Show me what you signed. We'll discuss it after you're discharged. My phone vibrated beneath the blanket. A message from Claire. Do not sign anything. I checked the property record. Something is seriously wrong. I read it twice. Then I looked back at Dad and stopped arguing. He mistook my silence immediately. Good, he said, standing. Rest. The buyer takes possession in 10 days, so we'll have your things moved before then. 10 days. Mom kissed my forehead. Madison avoided my eyes, and all three walked out. The second the door closed, I forwarded Claire everything Dad had sent me, including a photograph of the power of attorney document he claimed gave him permission. Less than 15 minutes later, Claire called. I have it. What does it say? Not over the phone, but I'm sending an emergency notice to the title company right now. My fingers tightened around the phone. What kind of notice? The kind that stops them from transferring your condo until we find out exactly what your father did. While Dad was driving home believing he had 10 days before someone else owned my home, Claire Bennett was already freezing the transaction. By the time I left the hospital, Dad had already changed the story. According to him, I wasn't fighting to keep my home. I was trying to destroy Madison's wedding. Relatives started calling before I could even walk across my condo without assistance. Jenny, surely there's some compromise. Your parents were only trying to help your sister. Do you really want Madison remembering you as the reason her wedding fell apart? 2 days later, Dad called a family meeting at my parents' house. I arrived wearing my spinal brace and leaning heavily on a walker. Madison was there with her fiancé. His parents sat beside them. Several relatives filled the living room. Dad stood near the fireplace, holding a folder. The moment I entered, he lifted it. Good. Now everyone can see what Jenny refuses to acknowledge. He removed a document. Power of attorney, signed by Jenny. It authorized me to act for her. My aunt looked at me. You signed that? I signed a limited document years ago. Dad shook his head. Now she's changing the story because she regrets helping her sister. I didn't argue. Claire had told me exactly what to ask. Dad, did the title company see the original? His confidence flickered. Why does that matter? Did they? Madison's fiancé suddenly leaned forward. Robert, you said everything had been cleared. The room went quiet. I looked at him. What do you mean? He glanced at Madison before answering. The buyer is my Uncle Thomas. I froze. Dad had never mentioned that. He agreed to buy your condo privately, Madison's fiancé continued. Your father offered him a good price because the deal needed to happen quickly. This wasn't just a questionable sale. Dad had arranged a rushed transaction inside Madison's future family. Then came the worst part. Thomas already advanced some of the money. My mother whispered, "Please." But he kept talking. The wedding deposits were due. Your dad guaranteed the closing, so Thomas released part of the funds early. I looked at Madison. You already spent money from my condo. Some deposits are non-refundable, she said quietly. Dad stepped toward me. So now you understand what happens if you keep pushing this. I stared at him. He wasn't explaining the consequences. He was using them against me. If I saved my condo, Madison could lose thousands of dollars and possibly the wedding she had planned. Every person in that room would know exactly who to blame. I looked at my sister. Madison, are you seriously okay with this? Her lips parted. Then she looked away. She said nothing. My phone rang. Claire. I answered in front of everyone. Claire. Her voice was calm. Jenny, I've reviewed the document and the property records. Dad watched me. What did you find? Claire paused. Then she said the words that changed everything. Jenny, your father never had the power to sell that condo. I stepped away from the living room while everyone stared at me. What do you mean, he never had the power? Claire answered carefully. The document Robert used is limited. There are specific restrictions on what he can do for you. Such as transferring your real estate. I looked through the doorway at Dad. He was still holding that power of attorney like it proved everything. So the condo isn't sold. Closing hasn't been completed, and it won't be while this is disputed. The title company has frozen the transaction pending investigation. Behind me, Madison asked, "What's happening?" I lowered the phone. The closing is frozen. Dad's face changed instantly. You did what? I didn't do anything. My attorney did. He crossed the room. Call her back. Tell her to remove it. No. Within hours, the consequences started spreading. Thomas wanted his advance returned. The venue contacted Madison because its final balance was due within days. Other vendors had also been promised payment from the expected condo proceeds. Dad called me repeatedly. His solution never changed. Sign a new deed. No. This can all disappear, Jenny. My condo would disappear. Then Claire sent me copies of documents she had obtained. One paragraph stopped me. Thomas had not simply advanced money on trust. Mom and Dad had personally guaranteed repayment if the condo transaction failed. I called Claire. They guaranteed his money. Yes. With what? There was a short pause. You need to see the full document yourself. That was when Dad's desperation finally made sense. He wasn't only trying to save Madison's wedding anymore. Something else was now at risk. I agreed to one final meeting, but this time it happened in Claire's office. Dad arrived demanding I sign the deed. This has gone far enough. Madison came in minutes later, furious. You told me the wedding money came from investments. Mom reached for her. Madison. Don't. Claire waited until everyone sat down. Then she placed 3 documents across the conference table. The first is Jenny's power of attorney. Dad said nothing. The second concerns the legal structure holding Jenny's condo. His eyes moved toward me. Claire placed down the third. And this is the private guarantee Robert and Linda gave Thomas when he advanced the money. Mom's face drained of color. Dad reached across the table. We don't need to go through that. Before he could take it, Madison snatched the document. Why are you trying to hide this? Madison, give it to me. She turned to the final page. Her eyes stopped moving. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then she looked up at our parents. What did you do? Dad stood. Give me the paper. Madison pulled it against her chest. No. She looked down again at the security listed beneath her parents' signatures. Then she read it aloud. The house. Mom covered her mouth. Madison stared at them. You put your own house up as security. Claire didn't let Dad take the document. Sit down, Robert. For the first time since I woke from surgery, my father did what someone else told him. Claire placed her hand on the second document. 3 months ago, Jenny came to me because Robert had repeatedly suggested borrowing against her condo to help finance Madison's wedding. Madison looked at me. You knew they wanted your condo. I knew Dad wanted me to borrow against it. I said no. Claire continued. Because Jenny was concerned about future pressure, we placed the condo into a revocable trust. Jenny retained beneficial ownership and control, but any transfer of the property required trustee authorization. Dad stared at Claire. You never told me that. Jenny looked directly at him. It wasn't yours to know. Claire slid the old power of attorney toward him. This document gave you limited authority over certain matters. It expressly excluded the transfer of Jenny's real estate. Dad's voice dropped. I was acting for my daughter. You represented that you had authority you did not possess. Nobody interrupted her. The required trustee authorization was never given. The title company will not complete the transfer. I almost didn't trust what I was hearing. So my condo is still yours, Jenny. For several seconds, I said nothing. 4 words had just returned the future I thought my parents had taken while I was unconscious. Dad leaned back. Mom started crying. What happens to our house? Not are you okay, Jenny? Not we're sorry. Our house. Claire turned to the third document. That depends on repayment of the money Thomas advanced. You personally guaranteed those funds. Madison stared at Mom. You told me the wedding money came from savings and investments. We were going to replace it after the condo closed, Mom said. You told me Jenny agreed. Mom went silent. I looked at Madison. At the house, when you found out they were selling my home, why didn't you say anything? She rubbed her hands together. I knew something wasn't right. But you stayed quiet. Her eyes filled. I thought if the sales stopped, everything would collapse. The venue, the catering, everything we'd already planned. So you were willing to let me lose my home so you could keep your wedding. Madison looked down. There was nothing left to say. Thomas demanded his advance back. Because Mom and Dad had personally guaranteed it, that debt stayed exactly where it belonged, with them. They liquidated investments rather than risk enforcement against their house. The enormous wedding budget disappeared almost overnight. Madison canceled luxury guest accommodations, scaled back the flowers and honeymoon, moved the reception to a smaller venue, and covered part of the remaining cost herself. Claire preserved my right to pursue civil damages and referred Dad's conduct for appropriate legal review. I didn't rescue him from any of it. That decision caused another explosion. Dad continued telling relatives I had destroyed Madison's wedding, so the relevant documents were shared with the family. The calls changed quickly. People who had told me to compromise suddenly stopped calling. The story was no longer that Jenny Carter selfishly refused to help her sister. Now everyone knew my parents had tried to dispose of their recovering daughter's $380,000 home while she was under anesthesia. I revoked every remaining authorization my parents held. I stopped helping them financially, and I stopped explaining why. 4 weeks later, Madison still got married. I wasn't there. While my family gathered at the smaller wedding they could actually afford, I was somewhere far more important. Home. I moved slowly through my condo with my walker, past the support rails and accessibility modifications I had installed before surgery. Everything was exactly where I had left it. The locks had been changed. My estate documents had been updated. Claire was now my sole emergency financial contact. And the condo remained protected through the trust. Physical therapy was difficult. Some mornings, Crossing my living room felt like a victory. But every painful step was happening on a floor my parents had promised to someone else. For years, I thought being the dependable daughter meant absorbing whatever my family needed from me. That ended the day I woke up to 61 missed calls. They tried to spend my future while I was unconscious. But when the paperwork finally spoke for itself, the only home my parents put at risk was their own.